Hey guys, it's Dolly Pop. Today I am going to teach you how to create a ghostly effect in Photoshop. This is the October tutorial. I do a monthly tutorial series, and since it is the spookiest month of the year, I decided to do this kind of ghost tutorial for October. You can see the step-by-step for this image, as well as get access to the PSD file, which has all of these layers named and labeled nicely by pledging $5 or more on my Patreon. I will put a link in the description. I put tutorials up every month, and Patreon gets early access to tutorials as well as getting access to the PSD files and a PDF format step-by-step where I kind of go, I guess, into a little bit more detail about what I'm doing. So before we begin, let me just kind of show you guys how I have my layers set up. So I'm recording this live because I think it's going to be a lot easier. So I have this ghost girl, and here's kind of how I broke everything up. I have the background in one folder. I have the rat in another folder. I have her in another folder, and what I actually did was I put the rat's tail in a third folder. The reason I did this is because it's going to be behind her, and we're going to be playing with like translucency and opacity and stuff like that. So we're going to get started. So making sure that everything is in layer groups is just going to make it easier to do this technique. I'm using Photoshop CC. These techniques should work in a variety of programs. I know most of them will definitely work in Clip Studio Paint. Sometimes Procreate doesn't have quite as many functionality tools as Photoshop does, so this technique may not work in Procreate, but it will definitely work in any version of Photoshop. So we're going to start with her, I think. And I'm kind of figuring this out as I go along. I have a little bit of an idea of what I want to do, but this is the first time I'm doing this, so yeah, it's gonna be fun. So what we're gonna do is we're going to take her folder and we're going to duplicate it, and then we're going to hide her. We're going to do this because if we mess up, we can always go back to the original folder. So I did that by just dragging it onto this duplicate thing. So now we're going to select all of the layers in this. See, there's a lot of layers in this folder. Then we're going to right click, and we are going to do merge layers. And this kind of makes it into one layer. So we're going to drag that, get rid of the folder because we don't want it. And we're going to name it Melissa, which is this character's name. So now she is on her own folder. Or on her own layer, everything merged, you know. There we go. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we want to create kind of a translucent effect. So what we could do is we could just, you know, change the opacity, like, woo, ta-da, done. We could also change the fill, which is similar to changing the opacity, but it makes things show up kind of differently behind her, which also looks cool, but isn't really what I'm looking for. So what we're going to do is we are going to be using the selection tool. You can use layer masks for this, but as I've said in previous tutorials, I prefer using the selection tool. And we are going to try to make kind of a more creative and dynamic way to make her look like a ghost. So first thing we're going to do is we are going to copy her selection. So I'm holding down the command key or control on Windows, and I selected the layer, which makes everything about her selected. You can see that the whole layer contents have been selected. So then above this, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to name it something like Guide. And on this layer is going to be our guide for what bits are going to be transparent on her. So I know for sure that I want, I think I want a little bit on the bottom to be transparent. So what I'm going to do is on this layer, I'm going to take a color that is not going to blend into any other colors, so I know what I'm doing. I'm going to take my gradient tool, I'm going to kind of blend out, oops, not like that, blend out like that, because I know the bottom I want to be kind of blended out, so it looks like she's kind of dissolving. Then I think I want this hand, so I'm going to take the lasso tool and I'm going to select only this hand, do the same thing with a gradient, just so kind of her extremities are kind of fading out a little bit. Okay, and then I think I'll do the same thing with the other hand. So very carefully, I'm going to lasso around here and apply a subtle gradient. And of course we have to do this with the hair strands as well. So I'm going to do this. Since it's kind of like the tips of her. Kind of like that. Oops, not like that. As you can see, I always do a billion trillion gradients and I never get the gradient right on the first try. So then we have these little strands right here. I use the lasso tool a lot. It's definitely, I use the magic wand tool a lot too. Yeah, definitely useful. And as you can see, this is like very out and about, which is fine. We're gonna get to that later. So let's zoom in a little bit. And we're going to select this strand right here. And by doing this individually, it kind of allows you to be kind of more realistic and more precise with how your gradients look. So it's not just like one big mass line like all across her hair. There we go, that looks good. And I'm going to blend these out in a second. I'll show you how to do that as well. Okay, so let's do this one. We'll just do like this. And of course we're paying attention to kind of like where the hair strands are and how long they are, stuff like that. Okay, so we're gonna do this and this. Oops. There we go. And then we'll do this one as well. Like that. And then this one by itself, I think. Oops. And you're gonna want to make sure you go over all the line art too, because since she's merged, it's not just the lines. Okay, cool, perfect. And actually, I may put some line treatment in there as well after we do this gradient thing. I'm just kind of experimenting. So this is actually like, it's almost kind of like half tutorial, half draw with me, because I haven't ever done this technique before, but I am feeling optimistic with how it's gonna look. I planned it out in my head while I was like could not fall asleep last night because I kept on thinking about like, okay, so like what am I going to do? Like, and you want to make sure when you're doing these gradients that none of them, so I'll probably redo this hand one. You want to make sure that you can see everything, because like, see, you can't see the very tips of her fingers down there. So I'm going to delete this and I'm going to kind of redo it a little bit. There we go. Like, you can see now that like it is purple a little bit, but you can still see things. Okay, so now let's finish up the hair. Do this right here. I'm like holding my breath while I select, because I don't know why I'm not doing it with my tablet, but I just, when I do selections, I do it with the mouse. I do not know why, but there you have it. Okay, so here we go. And last but not least, we'll do this little guy right here. Bink. And then this little guy right here. Just like that. Oh, and then for real, last but not least, we will do this right here. And as you can see, I'm tracing the outline of the actual strand of hair. And the good thing about this technique that I'm kind of developing as we speak is that as long as you can merge all of your stuff onto one layer, it doesn't matter how soft your shading is, it doesn't matter how soft your outlines are. By using this technique, you will be able to achieve this look because it just relies on the actual selection, not around like drawing or painting anything like that. So it is fairly easy, and as you can see, you can do it with a mouse. Okay, so this last little teeny weeny little hair strand is all we need. Okay, so now what we are going to do is, okay, so we have all of our kind of extremities. Realistically, we probably should do like the headphones because they're standing like apart from her, but if the headphones were translucent, then you'd see her underneath them, and she's, you know, merged. So maybe if I were to redo this piece, I would do the same thing as I did with the rat and maybe put her headphones on a different layer, but that's okay. It's a ghost in front of a carnival, so it's not a realistic piece anyway. We just want like some little bits of realism to kind of add to the whole illusion of everything. And real quick, I'm just going to redo this piece, but not quite that much. Right here. Okay, perfect. And then I'm going to redo this piece right here, like because it's not really a light source thing, it's this is the tip of her hair kind of thing. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I think I want a very soft gradient from the top as well, so I'm just going to, let's see here, that's a little too much. I think that's gonna be enough. Yeah, okay. So here's where the experimentation comes in. You're going to use Command or Control, select the contents of the guide, then you're going to toggle off the guide, go back to your original layer, and then you're going to press, oh wait, hold on, okay, hold on. 1 second. Let me get rid of and that should, hopefully the gradient is still intact. Yeah, it is. Okay, so now we're going to select our guide, we're going to minimize it, and then we are going to select our layer and then hit backspace. Oh yeah, it worked. And as you can see, it kind of creates a little bit of a translucent effect at her extremities. So this looks great, but it's not quite ghostly enough. So what I'm also going to do is I'm going to take the fill and just little by little in tiny increments. So I'm going to start with fill of 90%. And that looks pretty good. You can see kind of like the carousel behind her, a little bit of the tents, stuff like that. It looks particularly good in her hair. And the reason for that is because the difference between using opacity and using fill is that fill kind of acts in a different way. So things that are darker colors, it kind of shows the opacity or shows the transparency more on things that are dark. So if you look at her shirt, which is a bright yellow, you can kind of barely see the outline of those tents. But if you look at her hair, which is dark, you can really see the outline of the carousel. So just for funsies, we're going to see what it looks like at 90% opacity. See, now you can see them equally, but it looks a little bit more dull and a little less dynamic. So personally, I almost always use fill instead of transparency when I'm fiddling with stuff. So 90 was a little bit too solid for me, so I'm gonna try 80 and see how that looks. So that looks pretty good. I'm thinking it might be a little too much though, so we're going to be really fiddly with it. Or oops, not 8. Yep, there we go, done. We're gonna go to 85. So I think 85 might be our sweet spot because you can still kind of see the carousels behind her. You can see the stripes behind her as well. Yeah, that looks pretty good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this layer because, as I said, once you get the layer that you like, duplicate it so that just in case you mess up, you can go back to this one. So I'm gonna leave it as Melissa copy for now, even though that's like driving my OCD wild because we don't know if we're gonna keep this layer. So I think I would like to do a little tiny bit of a blur on her. So I'm gonna go to Gaussian blur, and we're not gonna do that much of a blur, but we're going to do just a little bit of a blur. And you know, I'm honestly kind of thinking that I only want a blur on the edges. So let's see here. Box blur. Okay, so I think I know how I'm gonna do this. Okay, so I'm going to make another copy of her. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the contents of it again. And then I'm going to think about how much I want it blurred. So I'm thinking maybe about 20 pixels, which is maybe about 30, which is a little bit bigger than the line shape that I used. So I'm going to go to select, modify, and contract. And then I'm going to plug in 35 pixels. Is that going to be enough? I think so. Okay, so then what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the inverse by going select, modify, select inverse. I usually do it with the keyboard, but for some reason I did not this time. And then what I'm going to do is, okay, no, cancel that. I'm not going to inverse it. Instead of inversing the selection, I'm actually just going to delete this part. So then what I'm going to do is, so now you can see we have this and this. So it's still like it's giving her like a little bit of a border. But once we do this blur, filter blur, Gaussian blur, awesome. Okay, so now we're going to up this. I want it like, yeah, that's pretty cool. Okay, so maybe a little bit more. Just gonna give her a soft look. Perfect. So now we're going to drag it behind the first one. So as you can see, there's like a little bit of a blur on the outside. It gives her like just a bit of a kind of a smoky, ghostly kind of look. So now as you can see, that also adjusted kind of the opacity of that. So what we can do is we can make this even lower. So we're going to kind of just drag it along until it starts looking, yes, there we go. Okay, so I'm thinking 50, it's gonna be that. Yes, perfect, yeah, okay, awesome. So yeah, so we have our Gaussian blur, and as you can see, like the difference, it really gives her kind of that little smoky, spooky kind of look. So before we go any farther, we're going to do the same thing on the rat. So I'm going to do rat 2 like this. And what I might do is I may just do a little bit of a blur on rat 2, because if I, just hypothetically, if I reduce the opacity too much, it doesn't really look like anything. So we're going to duplicate that. Actually, you know, I guess we don't even really need to duplicate the folder. We can go like this. We can duplicate layers. And then we can merge the layers. So this is going to be called rat 2. And it's going to be going behind all of the Melissas. So then we're going to hide rat 2. We're going to rename our layers and clean them up a little bit. We're going to rename the Melissa copy the final Melissa. She's like a final girl, except for she did die because obviously she's dead. Yeah, this character, by the way, it is a character that I created through story polls on Instagram. People voted for a ghost who had like a 90s aesthetic, and one of the random emojis I selected from a list that people gave me was a Ferris wheel. And as soon as I selected that, I had this idea of this girl who died on a Ferris wheel at like a pier carnival, and the carnival shut down for 10 years, and then once they started reopening it as like an amusement park, she was awoken, and you know, kind of haunts the amusement park, and she's not really like malevolent or mean or anything, but she is very mischievous. So she kind of like tries to get all the teenagers to like do dangerous things and stuff like that. I'm kind of thinking like Lost Boys, but if they were ghosts instead of vampires, because obviously it takes place like on a pier in the summertime. Yeah, but so yeah, that's the idea for this character. She's really cool, and I like her a lot. So anyway, we're gonna name this one Blur. Okay, cool. So with Rat 2, I think I'm going to leave that for now, and I'm going to work on Rat 1. So again, we are going to duplicate these layers, and then we are going to right click them and merge them. I'm going to rename him Rat 1. And then we're going to hide that. Okay, so we're going to make a new layer called Rat Guide. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take our gradients, and we are going to, let's give him a little bit on his little nose, and then let's see here, a little bit on his arms, and he's like kind of a more simple shape, so he's like a little easier, and then a little bit on his tail. So that should work. So we're going to select the guide and then hide it, and then just erase parts of him, and we'll see how that looks. See, he's already a little bit ghostly, and then he is going to get his opacity adjusted as well. Let's see here, 85 we said, I think. Cute. Yeah, you can see it kind of like gives a little bit of a spooky atmosphere. And then we are going to duplicate him. We are going to select it. We're going to modify the selection, contract by 30. He's smaller, so we'll do 25 pixels. We're going to erase that, deselect it, and we're going to blur it, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Oh yeah, that looks really good. Okay, and then we're going to drag it behind. And let's see here. He has less going on in the back, so I'm going to only set it to like 60, I think. Oh yeah, he's so cute. Okay, so then for the tail, I might just put a little blur on it, because like I said, if we, you know, start messing with this, it's gonna look kind of just like nothing, you know. So filter, and that actually goes to show you that sometimes just kind of figuring it out as you go is kind of good, because if you use like a set technique for everything, every piece of art is different, and even elements within a piece of art are going to be different, so you can't use the same technique everywhere. Okay, so she's looking great, he's looking great, our little rat. I haven't named him yet, but I don't know. Okay, so we're going to name this Blur. Oh, we're going to name it Rat Blur, actually. Rat Blur. And then I'm actually going to drag the rat folder above that so that all of our kind of ghost stuff is in the same place. So next, I'm thinking that we might need some atmospheric effects. So I am going to create a new layer. I'm going to take my palettes that I have, and I'm thinking maybe, what color do I want? I'm thinking maybe this kind of purple. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to do like a little gradient. I set it to multiply. Do a little gradient. Oops. I usually edit that kind of stuff out, but I'm doing it as I go, so I won't be doing that. Okay, so yeah, really cool, kind of like a vignette kind of look. We're going to reduce the fill for that. And then I think I want like a little bit of, you know what, I have an idea. So I'm going to go into our original Melissa, and I'm going to duplicate the eye sparkle and the eye glow. and we're just going to see how it looks at full opacity on top of her. Okay, not very good. See, that's why you kind of like, it does look good behind her though. Yeah, I think I'm going to keep that. So as you can see, if I toggle it off and on, you can see it gives a little bit of like pop. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so I'm going to leave it as over sparkle. Actually, I'll just name it Eye Glow. Okay. Okay, anyway, so we're going to name this vignette. And I think that we might need like a little bit of texture. So I'm going to select this yellow is going to be good. I'm going to put it on overlay, and I want to do some sort of not quite stars, but some kind of like just a little bit of texture. So I have this little sprinkle brush. I'm gonna make it big, and I'm just going to kind of draw around her. So it's almost kind of like dust motes a little bit. Just kind of here and there to give the piece a little bit more texture and visual interest. Oh yeah, that looks good. And I think I'm going to add to that a bit of this at key areas. I'm going to reduce the fill on that. I'm going to name it Sparkle 1 because there's going to be a Sparkle 2, and I'm going to do this one just like a couple little dots, like kind of a stream of them. That's nice. Okay, and I'm actually going to color these blue, I think. So I'm going to select that color and fill the selection. Oops. Okay, cool. And then I will set that to overlay as well and reduce the opacity and name it Sparkle 2. So now I'm kind of looking from a zoomed out perspective, kind of looking and checking for if things pop out. I definitely see the rat clearly. I see her clearly. Everything is looking kind of good. The one thing I'm going to try, I think, is I might try to add a little bit. I'm going to take these sparkles down a little bit more so they're just more like texture. There we go. I was thinking about maybe adding a glow to her, but I don't think it needs it. I think that sometimes adding too many effects can be overkill. So instead, we will just add the finishing touch, which is my signature, and believe it or not, this actually takes a long time sometimes to figure out where I want it. So we'll just put it, make it a little smaller. Right there. Maybe so. There we go. So yeah, there you have it. Ghostly effect in Photoshop. As you can see, we did our hair bits, we adjusted the fill versus the opacity, and she's looking awesome and spooky and ready to go. Yeah, so that's it. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to comment me on this video or message me here or on Instagram. And as I said, if you join my Patreon, you can see this tutorial early, as well as get access to the step-by-step images and the labeled PSD file as well. So if you want to kind of look at all my layers and go up close and see what they do, you also get, since it's PSD, you get the full size. So Let me show you how close. So this is actually 100%. It's a big image, so you can really see all those nitty gritty details in there. And yeah, that transparency looks so good up close that I think the wallpaper that I make for this is gonna be like that view. It's gonna look good. But anyway, yeah, so thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, make sure to subscribe to my channel, and I will see you next time for another tutorial.